ADJ 100 Survey of Criminal Justice, Chapter 4 Counting Crimes and Criminals. The dark figure of crime. The dark figure of crime is the unknown amount of crime that occurs. Therefore, it is accurate to say that the criminal justice system does operate in ignorance. It's very difficult to determine the number of criminals and the number of crime. The need for numbers. Nettler in 1984 provided 4 reasons for counting crime. Number 1, the description refers to painting an accurate picture of the number and distribution of criminal offenses. This is crucial for the allocation of resources. If we see an uptick in violent crime, perhaps we need to take our limited resources and apply them toward reducing violent crime rather than property crime. Risk assessment. It's necessary to predict how much crime is likely to occur. If the numbers are inaccurate, it is impossible to conduct risk assessment. Hotspots of crime refer to locations where much more crime happens than at other places. Program evaluation is an effort that often relies on estimates of a program's effect on crime. And then, of course, to explain crime, or explanation, is the most troublesome of all the reasons why we need accurate numbers about crime and criminals. We do not know whether those who commit the dark figure of crime offenses are poor or wealthy. The impact of ignorance results in an inability to assess or predict the effects of policy changes on levels of crime. An example of this arises from the war on drugs. Zeisel in 1982 suggests that drug offenses present an almost limitless supply of business for the police. The volume of drug offenders entering the criminal justice system are more a product of police activity than it is of violent crime. Police are encouraged to pursue drug charges. Arrests in 2016 affected less than 6% of the population reporting use of illegal drugs. So 94% of the people who self-reported with the numbers, which is what this chapter is about, were not caught. Yet those 6% that were caught are experiencing high levels of incarceration. Our sources of information. It's important to know how much crime is out there so we can take our limited resources and apply them in the right place. The 2 big types of statistics, or major types of statistics, that I want you to know about are official statistics and unofficial statistics. Official statistics are statistics provided by the criminal justice agencies as a record of, or official record of, their activities. That is most likely going to be from the Uniform Crime Report, which we'll get into. Unofficial statistics are those measures of the rate and nature of crime that do not rely on the reporting of official agencies. That could be an example, that could be a self-report survey. Sometimes criminologists put out self-report surveys on criminal activity. Believe it or not, most people are going to be fairly accurate, especially if it's anonymous, to be able to say, look, in the past year, here's how much crime I've committed. On the other side of that, it could very well be that we're putting out victimization surveys. In other words, have you been a victim of an offense? Perhaps someone assaulted you that you didn't call the police. Perhaps someone stole something from you that you didn't call the police. For whatever reason, that's the dark figure of crime, and those are unofficial statistics. They're still very valuable, and in some cases much more valuable than official data or official statistics, which rely on police records. Sometimes police records or official data may actually just be telling us how effective the police are at catching criminals, not necessarily the amount of crime that is occurring. Again, our official statistics are UCR. I want you to know that acronym. It stands for Uniform Crime Reports, are published annually by the Federal Bureau of Investigation from reports received by the nation's police departments. So typically each state would have one police department that's in charge of collecting the data from all the others, and then once a year they transmit those numbers to the FBI. In Virginia, that is the Virginia State Police. They have a central records exchange that everyone who is arrested, even in a small town somewhere in Southwest Virginia or Southside Virginia or even Virginia Beach, that is arrested, that number will be transmitted, and all of the demographic data of the offender, all of that information will be transmitted to the state police, who will then send it to the FBI. You can go on the FBI's website and read about the official statistics or the Uniform Crime Report. One of the ways that they would classify crimes could be unfounding. That is, a crime occurs if the officer decides that a criminal complaint is unfounded and considers the report untrustworthy. And defounding is a crime occurs when a police officer decides that an offense was less serious than reported. So just because someone turned in that they were robbed, they were not necessarily robbed, then they would, of course, want to change that before transmitting it to the FBI. More on the Uniform Crime Report, or UCRs. It covers 29 different crimes, including 8 crimes known as the crime index. Certainly for your exam, I want you to know all of those 8 different crimes. This crime index is homicide, forcible rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, larceny, theft, auto theft, and arson. So those index crimes would be when someone says the crime rate is rising or the crime rate is falling, that's a combination of the numbers from those 8 crimes that are included in the crime index. Most, not all police departments report to the FBI. It is certainly not required in the United States. We do not have a centralized police department. It is broken down under a federal system between all 50 states control their own as far as training and how they do things. So there's no incentive or no requirement that you report to UCR the amount of crimes that happen in your jurisdiction, but most do. The hierarchy rule is a procedure that requires the police officers to report only the most serious offense, masks the actual number of offenses. And the crime rate formula is useful to UCR and is discovered by multiplying the number of crimes by 100 and dividing it by the total population of that area. And again, that's going to be, that crime rate is going to be those index crimes. How do we improve the UCR? It's been criticized for adjusting the population size through the use of crime rate formulas, also criticized for the hierarchy rule and the inability to accurately obtain a number of all crimes. In 1982, a task force began to implement improvements and create the National Incident-Based Reporting System, NIBRS. Know what that acronym is for your exam. National Incident-Based Reporting System gathers information about crimes known to police that are much more detailed. Remember, UCR is arrest data, people who have been charged. National Incident-Based Reporting may very well collect data where we don't have a suspect, no one's been arrested. Consists of 22 Group A offenses and 11 Group B. Records records information for each incident in 6 segments representing data about the case. Unofficial statistics, measures of the rate and nature of crime that do not rely on the reporting of official agencies and agents of crime. 2 basic sources, once again, I mentioned both of these before. The first being victim surveys and then self-report studies. These self-report surveys are criminality. So number 1, we're looking at, were you a victim of a crime? And number 2, did you actually commit a crime? They reveal that official statistics cover only about half of all crime. Think about that. When you hear about the crime rate that's going on in your state, that's going on in your county, those crime rates are only covering about half of what is really being committed. Then you say, why? That could be that people have various reasons that they don't want to call the police. It could be that someone is a family member who has assaulted them. They don't want the person to go to jail. It's basically handled within their family. But then when they go to a self-report survey or a victim survey, they're more likely to report it, and the police never knew about that crime. They reveal that official statistics cover about half, as I mentioned, also show that persons arrested for criminal offenses are not representative of all those who commit crimes. Victim surveys. 1965 marked the year that the National Opinion Research Center of the NORC of the University of Chicago conducted the first survey of crime victims. The NORC survey contacted a spokesperson for each household surveyed and asked that person if anyone in the household had been a victim of certain crimes in the past year. In 1971, the National Crime Victimization Survey began collecting data. National Crime Victimization Survey, the NCVS. Know what that stands for? Results over the years indicate that the UCR data are incomplete. In other words, their official data, police records, are incomplete. In 2016, victims indicated that only 42% of violent crimes and 35% of property crimes have been reported to the police. Victimization data provide information about the nature and extent of crime as understood by those reporting that they have been crime victims. NCVS data are not directly comparable to UCR. The two data sets do not measure identical sets of crimes, and they define certain crimes in different ways. Taken together, the UCR and NCVS provide valuable information regarding crime trends. I would say the same thing applies to official data as well. Most of the time, it's really difficult to capture that dark figure of crime, to know exactly what has happened, but at least we can see most of the time the trends. In other words, is violent crime going up? Is property crime going down? What about white collar crime? What about instances of people who are driving intoxicated? People who assault police? Sometimes when the police are doing the assaulting, all those sorts of trends help us to understand what's going on in their society, even though our numbers may not be accurate. Improving the NCVS. In response to the number of problems identified with the NCVS, the Bureau of Justice Statistics changed the interview used to gather information in 1992. The survey now interviews all persons aged 12 or older residing in households included in the sample. Interviewers may now specifically ask respondents about their experiences as victims of rape or sexual assault. The greatest change occurred in estimates of rape and assault. The Bureau of Justice Statistics is currently in the process of identifying and testing an improved survey designed to measure rape and sexual assault victimization. So, our current state of media, if you listen to any portion of the news or look at any sort of crime rates, you're going to see that sexual assault, sexual victimization has increased dramatically. Is that accurate? Maybe, but maybe we're just starting to feel better about reporting it now. The police are required to take reports now. So it may not necessarily show a trend that you're more apt to be victimized today. It could be that you were just as apt, if not more, in years past, but it was not reported. Self-report surveys of crime. Self-report studies attempt to measure the amount of crime committed and describe the characteristics of the criminal offenders. Researchers ask a sample of the public if they've committed any crimes. Often they include status offenses, that's what juveniles could commit that doesn't necessarily pertain to adults. So think about things like truancy, skipping school, things like failure to meet a curfew. You don't have to come home at 10 o'clock. So an adult could do those things and would not be charged, but a juvenile could be charged technically with a status offense for failing to come home at 10 o'clock or, if you're under 18 years old. They also share problems of telescoping and forgetting. Respondents may be untruthful, we understand that. Gather insight about the characteristics of offenders. Males report more criminal activity than females. One way of looking at that can be that perhaps males commit more criminal activity. Could it also be that females are much less likely to self-report that they commit certain offenses? African Americans report more frequent and more serious offenses than Caucasians. Summary of crime statistics. The relative frequency of crimes reported by all three procedures is similar. Persons arrested and sentenced are not always representative of the general population. The poor, urban residents, and minorities are far more likely to be arrested and processed than their numbers in the population suggest. So if we look at official data only, you may think that minorities could possibly commit more crime. But when you look at self-report and victimization studies, it starts to level out a bit to be much more representation or representative of the general population. What could this lead us to conclude? It could be that the police are targeting this population one way or another. Females are less likely to become involved in the justice process than their numbers in the population would indicate. One exception is the juvenile justice system, where girls are often subjected to more processing than boys. And in conclusion, understanding the justice system, one fact is that the criminal justice system operates like a giant sieve. It filters huge volumes of crimes and criminals down to a relatively small number of offenders found in prisons. This process is known as the funnel effect. Read more about the funnel effect, and that's how a criminal justice system works. At each successive stage, the less serious offenses and the less dangerous offenders are diverted away from the justice system. Plea bargaining helps to manage the large number of cases. So just imagine a funnel, and at the top you have all the crimes that are committed. And then as we progress down the funnel, you see that the dark figure of crime is eliminated, thereby making it smaller. Then you have certain police who fail to do their jobs as they should and make their arrest. So only a portion get arrested. And after they're arrested, only a few get tried. And after their trial, only a few get convicted. And even of those who are convicted, only a few actually get sent to prison. So if you take this large swath of people who actually committed a crime and then look at how many actually go to prison and enter the justice system, it's going to be a relatively small number.